Cold kills faster than bullets, and during World War II, some signal units stayed alive using nothing more than thin metal wires and raw ingenuity. That's not a metaphor. It's a real, documented survival workaround used in some of the harshest environments of the 20th century. No stoves, no fuel shipments, no modern heaters. Just electricity, resistance, and a deep understanding of how physics could keep men alive when supply lines failed. And here's the interesting part. This wasn't a comfort trick. It was a necessity. During World War II, signal units were often deployed ahead of main forces or isolated behind enemy lines. Their job was simple on paper but brutal in reality. Maintain communication at all costs. Radios had to stay on, wires had to stay intact, operators had to stay conscious. In freezing conditions, that last part became the hardest challenge of all. Signal units were uniquely positioned for an unconventional solution because, well, they already worked with electricity every single day. Field radios, generators, telephone lines, switchboards, power was their lifeline. And when winter closed in, they realized something crucial. If electricity could power a transmitter, it could also produce heat. This is where metal wires come in. Electric current passing through a metal conductor creates resistance. Resistance produces heat. It's basic physics. But, in the field, under fire, in snow and mud, it became a survival tool. These weren't glowing coils or open flames. That would have been dangerous and, honestly, obvious. Instead, wires were stretched along wooden frames, wrapped around metal rods, or embedded behind boards where the heat could radiate slowly and evenly. When connected to a generator or battery supply already powering communications equipment, the wires warmed up just enough to raise the internal temperature of a shelter. Not hot, just survivable. Now, this is where things get clever. Signal units couldn't afford to waste power. Radios needed steady voltage. Overloading a generator could knock out communications entirely, so the heating wires were carefully calculated. Thin enough to generate warmth, thick enough not to burn out, and long enough to spread heat without spiking resistance. In some cases, old telephone wire was used. In others, coils salvaged from damaged equipment were repurposed. The goal wasn't to heat air like a modern heater. The goal was to warm bodies, hands and critical gear just enough to function. Cold destroys electronics. Vacuum tubes become unstable. Condensation forms. Metal contracts. Batteries drain faster. By slightly warming the environment, signal units protected their equipment as much as themselves. A frozen radio is a silent radio, and silence on the battlefield could be fatal. Shelters varied widely. In Europe, signal teams often operated from reinforced dugouts, basements, or makeshift huts. On the Eastern Front, cold was relentless, and heating became a matter of life and death. In mountainous regions and winter campaigns, these wire-based heaters were sometimes the only defense against hypothermia during long night shifts. The method wasn't standardized across all armies, but the concept appeared wherever electricity met desperation. German, Allied, and Soviet signal units all experimented with resistive heating in different forms. Manuals didn't always spell it out, but field improvisation filled the gaps. Here's the practical brilliance of it. Metal wire heaters had no flame. That meant no smoke, no light leaks, no obvious thermal signature compared to a stove or fire. In a war where detection could mean artillery fire or airstrikes, that really mattered. A warm shelter that didn't advertise itself was, well, a tactical advantage. There were risks, of course. Overheating could melt insulation. Poor connections could spark. Wet environments added danger. Signal operators had to monitor their setups constantly. Many units placed heating wires near the floor or along walls, keeping them away from bedding and paper maps. This wasn't luxury. This was controlled discomfort. What makes this story resonate with survival history is how transferable the logic is. These soldiers weren't inventing new technology. They were repurposing what they already had: power source, conductor, shelter. Physics did the rest. And that's the core lesson. Survival isn't about having the perfect tool. It's about understanding what tools can become. WWII signal units understood electricity deeply because their lives depended on it. They knew how much current they could draw. They knew how resistance worked. They knew how to adapt without breaking their primary mission. That mindset is what kept them alive in environments that killed unprepared units in days. Modern survivalists often focus on gear lists. These soldiers focused on systems: energy in, energy out, heat where it mattered, risk managed, not eliminated. There's another layer here that often gets overlooked: morale. Warmth isn't just physical. A slightly warmer shelter meant clearer thinking, steadier hands, better decision-making. In communication units, mistakes could cascade across entire operations. A missed signal, a delayed transmission, a garbled message. Heat helped prevent that. And while this method wouldn't replace proper heating, it bought time. Time until resupply. Time until relief. Time until the weather broke. That's the real power of forgotten survival techniques. They're not magic, they're margins. Small advantages stacked together until survival becomes possible. Today we rely on advanced insulation portable heaters and lithium batteries. But, strip all that away, and the principles remain the same. Energy is energy. Resistance creates heat. Knowledge turns scarcity into advantage. WWII signal units didn't set out to invent a heating system. They set out to stay alive and keep talking. The wire heaters were really a byproduct of necessity, intelligence and adaptation under pressure. And that's why this story belongs on Legacy of Survival. Because history isn't just about battles and dates. It's about problem-solving when failure isn't an option. It's about quiet innovations that never made headlines but saved lives anyway. If you enjoy uncovering these forgotten techniques, the kind that sit at the intersection of history, physics and, raw human ingenuity, make sure you're part of this channel. Like the video if this surprised you. Share it with someone who loves survival history. And subscribe to Legacy of Survival for more true stories of how people endured long before modern comfort did the thinking for them. Because the past still has lessons left to teach.